If you clicked this video, you probably know that the logical answer is no, it's not too late and it's never too late to start over. However, that doesn't necessarily always make it easy to navigate the inner battle you might be having in your head about the big change you want to make or the dream you want to pursue. That war can look like the logical part of your brain saying you have too much to lose, you can't afford to take that chance. And then the inner critic in you might be saying you're too old, you're too late, it's not worth it. Now, I'm not here to tell you to quit your job or leave your relationship. Instead, I wanted to share how I worked through this battle inside my own head and heart, and why at age 42 with 5 children and a 6-figure executive salary, I chose to rewire my entire identity and career to become an artist and an author. Yes, I know that might sound crazy, but the truth is the way I went about making this really big decision for my life was actually very logical and practical. So stay until the end and I'll share with you the exact framework I used to make this big decision, as well as create a strong financial exit ramp. In my experience, there are 3 main fears that we have to work through in order to find the courage to make a big change in our lives like this, along with just being able to feel capable and confident within ourselves and at peace within ourselves that we can actually do it and succeed. The first fear is fear of financial ruin. Our hopes and dreams can be really easy to minimize and even ignore when we don't do the math to actually figure out if that change is possible or not. Our logical mind will continually shut the idea down by thinking things like, that's just not financially possible. I can't afford to take that risk, and that could ruin me financially. Typically, as I've dug deeper within these stories in my own head and really looked at this fear closely, I've seen time and again that these are often really over-dramatic versions of what could be possible, and hardly ever reflect actual reality. In the end, I've found that fear really can't lead you to finding a great solution. These inner, overly dramatic stories can keep us in jobs we hate and relationships that we're miserable in for years. In reality, every choice, including a major career change or a relationship change, can be logically thought through. It's all simply a matter of figuring out the math and finding a way from there. So what do we mean when I'm saying figure out the math? It's understanding how much money would this transition actually require. Not in the glamorized fantasy version where you have all the most perfect scenarios, but in reality, how much money is actually needed to make this change. Sometimes we need to devote consistent hours of our weekly life to making that change as well. So understanding the math there of how many hours do I need to invest to create this change can also be really helpful. Another crucial area that I think is so valuable to keep in mind and really do the math on is how much money and or time and energy would be required to keep this change and this big dream sustainable long term. And if you evaluate all of these questions and you really look at the math seriously and still decide, it's not possible, it's not an option for me right now, maybe later, that's totally fine. I think the most important step though is just have you done the math. I see far too many women who are never looking at the math and instead just stay listening to those voices in their head that are telling them it's not possible and they can't do it. Sometimes it helps to start your questioning with the idea of if I knew I couldn't fail, then ask the other questions. How much money, training, or support would I need to make this transition or make this dream a reality? When we believe in ourselves a little bit more, it's far easier to do the math and figure out logically if this is actually possible and what it would take to make it possible. In my own experience, I felt like I was stuck, like I had been working towards this goal and dream in these little ways for a really long time. But when I actually stopped and did the math a few months ago, I was shocked to realize that if we could just get a little bit more income over the next 7 months, then it might be possible for me to be able to make the transition out of my full-time career and shift fully into being an artist and an author. This started me looking at the personal debt that we've accrued over the years and just seeing how those monthly payments are just kind of keeping us stuck financially in a certain level of expenses every month. And so that's where I started to get really creative about how could we pay off all of that debt as quickly as possible and free up that part of our income so we could be less dependent on me having to work at my current job in order to survive. This led to me creating a 7-month debt snowball. I also calculated just how much income I would be needing to make if we were to make a few adjustments within our household, such as paying off one of our cars and not making any new investments in any other car or other expense this year that might really compromise this bigger goal. Now, this change, when I had been thinking about it in my head, it felt like the difference between losing our house and having to go and live in like a tiny apartment or something to just try to survive versus what it actually was just about getting our finances more in order, watching what we're spending our money on, and being really, really wise about moving forward with a plan. I found that I really only needed to make a fraction of my current level of income if we were to make those changes. And so I talked to my husband, and thankfully we were able to get fully on board between us, though I will say he definitely still had some hesitations, and there is a level of lifestyle that we've gotten used to at my current level of income. And so it wasn't the best news. It wasn't like he was celebrating how exciting this was, that I wanted to make this big, scary change of leaving my corporate job and instead trying to be an artist and an author. Probably a lot of people would be skeptical about that kind of change. Maybe you are even watching this, and that's totally okay. But I really worked hard with our math and our budgets and looking at just historically what we've been spending so that I could really understand this decision from a financial level and make sure that it made sense. So with knowing that it would only require a fraction of my income if we were to make these other bigger changes with paying off the debt and changing some of our expenses every month, then it started to open up some interesting possibilities for us. First of all, it helped me emotionally and mentally to be able to go to my job feeling grateful and feeling like this is this amazing gift that's helping me make this transition into the lifestyle and the career that I really, really want. This also led to me saying yes when an opportunity came for me to take on a second job to try to make some additional income, because since I already had that financial plan in place, and I knew that I wouldn't have to do that second job forever, then it made a ton of sense to just do that for that short period of time so that we could make that transition actually work. So with whatever big change you're considering, ask yourself, how much money would it actually take to create this change? If this is a change that's really going to potentially change your lifestyle, like what I was looking at, I had to really reconcile in my head what level of income I was comfortable with. And I'm not making a decision just for myself in this scenario. I'm making a decision that affects 6 other people that I dearly care about, my husband and our 5 children. So I had to make sure this decision could make sense financially. And I will admit that there are seasons in my life when it wouldn't have made sense and I wouldn't have been able to make this choice. But I do feel like when we get a plan in place and we at least know the math and we're not living in a fantasy or believing those stories like it's just impossible and there's just no way to make it work, at least when we have a plan and we understand what it would take, it helps us stay open to receiving some of the possibilities that might be out there that we just never would have considered had we not had that plan in the first place. So for example, with this second job opportunity, I would have never, ever, ever said yes to that before I had this plan because I was already working a lot and I was already feeling overburdened about how little art I was able to do in a day because of my full-time job. And so it never would have made sense before. But then what was really cool is that saying yes to that second job actually opened up this really incredible opportunity that is even catapulting this dream and this transition even further, even faster. So instead of 7 to 12 more months with my existing job, I now am transitioning out now, and I've got the next 7 months with this other opportunity that's going to be a better long-term fit and actually will support our needs even when I'm initially making that transition after that 7 months, to still have that portion of the total income I'm bringing in right now ongoing for as long as I would need it. So this kind of opportunity changes everything and makes this decision way more safe financially for us to make. But here again, never would have seen it if I wouldn't have asked the questions and gotten really serious about the math to understand what was possible and or what was needed in order to make this dream actually work. Also, as part of making this decision, I have been doing a ton of research about how artists actually do make money and how many of them do make really good money and make enough money for what we would be looking for. I've looked at all of the different monetization models artists use, and I've really studied successful artists and what it took and what is actually possible. So I feel like that, along with talking to actual artists in my community and really understanding what's going on and what's working for them, also helped me be very educated about this decision and this transition. Something else we always have to factor too is just understanding what are the costs if we don't change anything. So while that might not always equal a financial number, I think that can equal an energetic or emotional answer in us of the costs can sometimes just be too great. We can try to stay in a situation that just is miserable and isn't serving us for a long time, but the cost might be that our health declines as a result, or that we're just miserable all the time. And I found personally, as I was considering this decision with my children and thinking, if I stay at my current salary, maybe we can go on all sorts of cool trips together as a family and have really neat experiences that way. Or if I make this transition, maybe I don't have to be exhausted all the time and living for those trips, and instead can be enjoying my life more every day with my family right now and not just living for the weekend or living for the next vacation. So I felt that the cost of me staying in my current position and continuing that corporate path was actually really high for the quality of relationships and the experience I wanted to give to my children and for our family's lifestyle. So something I've seen, even just evaluating this for as long as I have for the past few years, is that in some ways, I don't know if I can make enough money to make up for not being there with my family like I want to be. That is a really, really high cost. When my kids were younger, I saw this firsthand as I was working, 60 to 90 hours a week, just trying to create financial abundance for our family. And I missed so many key moments in their lives. Like my youngest daughter, her first steps were texted to me by my husband while I was working. And while I'm grateful for those years and that experience, and there was a lot of good in that season as well, there's just a part of me that's not willing to make those same kind of sacrifices now at this point in my life. And I'm much more being intentional about what's the lifestyle I want to build, what's the everyday life I want to build and experience, instead of what's the career or the business that I want to grow and build. So if you know you've got to make a transition, or you really feel this call to this different way of living and this dream that's been reaching out to you for a long time from your heart and soul, I really recommend giving an expiration date as far as when you can transition out of what you're currently doing into that next step. It makes a huge difference in helping life and plans all line up together. Even if it's in a few years from now or weeks from now, what's the math that makes that transition work and makes it make sense? The second big fear is losing our identity. The hardest part of starting over and going out and building a big dream or leaving a current bad situation and trying to create a better one is often that our identity can be really tied up in our current reality. So for example, as someone who's spent the past 20 years building up this identity around myself of being this highly sought after brand strategist and marketing leader and executive and entrepreneur, These were titles and roles that made me feel really valuable and important even. So then to just start over at ground zero as an artist where I'm not even maybe the best artist I could be yet, and I'm still developing, and it feels very, very vulnerable to be starting out and being kind of bad at something for a minute, especially when I'm really good at this other thing that I do that I'm just not happy in and fulfilled by. Then I really had to look at my identity and what's actually true and how I know that I'm valuable and that I have worth. Another piece of that worth story was just how much I had been contributing to our family's finances. So feeling like the breadwinner and feeling like I was this major contributor to our family finances made me feel very valuable in this household, even to the point of probably not being the nicest wife all the time to live with, as I could be a little bit, as definitely my ego has gotten in the way sometimes of I'm making a ton of money or I can out earn you. And it just hasn't been ideal all the time. Not saying that that happens frequently, but it has come up and I'm not proud of that. So if you want to hear something totally crazy, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it right now, but I realized, gosh, maybe about a year or so ago, as I was hearing my kids saying things like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they would say, I don't know, I just want to be rich. And they were so focused on money all the time. I realized what I had been modeling in my own pursuit was that money was the only goal, that money equals safety, money equals freedom, money equals being happy, that I think I was subconsciously telling my kids if we had more money, mom and dad wouldn't be so stressed. Mom and dad would be happier. Mom and dad would be laughing more. They'd be having more fun. They'd be taking more time for their hobbies. They'd be taking better care of themselves. And so I think that they subconsciously started to see like money is the solution. If you just have plenty of money, then you're totally fine and you won't have any problems. And so I really had to take a hard look at this and see it within myself as, do I believe that? Do I believe that money solves absolutely everything? And I genuinely don't. And so I had to look at this dream that I kept postponing and saying not now and it's too late and maybe later, of being an artist and an author and making that career change. I had to look at that really seriously and ask myself the hard questions of why I kept postponing it and why it wasn't possible. Because I want my kids to do work that's fulfilling to them, and I want them to be smart about what they choose to do with their time, what they choose to study and pursue in higher education or whatever they choose to do. And I don't want that decision to just be solely on what makes the most money, because that's definitely a recipe for disaster, as those of us who have been adults for a while tend to know and have seen firsthand that money just doesn't always solve or anything. It helps a lot. I'm not shaming on money. Money is great. And also, it's just not the end-all be-all solution. And I needed to really shift things with my kids so that they could understand that better too. So with making this shift, it might be you have an identity wrapped up in this relationship that you've been in. You wonder, who am I without that relationship or without people knowing me in that relationship? And you might be really afraid of how this big change you have to make is going to affect how others perceive you. And that is definitely something that I think is very human and natural for us to look at. But I think it's important for each of us to figure out within ourselves what our own identity and worth is based on. So is it based on all those external factors? Do you only have value if you're making lots of money? Do you only have value if you're in this certain relationship or you have that job title or you're a part of this specific religion or group? Like, is that really where your value lies? Or does your value lie more intrinsically? Are you just valuable because you're a human and you're a miracle? The fact that any of us become a human in the grand lottery of life is pretty incredible. It's a miracle on its own. And so I think it's very easy to get lost in ideas of everything outside of us being what makes us worthy, and or our contributions what makes us worthy and valuable. But I think if we look at somebody who maybe hasn't been as fortunate physically and maybe has a lot of disabilities and or just doesn't have the same capacities that we have, are they suddenly less valuable? Do they not have value because they can't contribute in the same ways that those of us who have able bodies can? I think that's ridiculous. I think every human has value and worth on this planet. And when you're making a big decision like this in your life, it's really important for you to get deep and connected to what makes you have value. Do you feel that? Do you understand it for yourself? Because as soon as you understand that you have value and you really believe that for yourself, that also solves so much of the struggle of believing in yourself enough to believe in your dreams. I think a lot of us don't believe in our dreams or in the big changes we want to make for ourselves because of that lack of belief in ourselves. But I think that that belief in ourselves really starts coming and happening when we start listening to ourselves more. So the more you're actually hearing what matters to you and you're taking it seriously, you're doing the math, you're separating your identity out from things that aren't good indicators of if you have worth and value, the more it helps you really believe in yourself and what you want and your capacity to create that. The third fear can be this feeling of going all in or nothing. This kind of black and white thinking can keep us really, really stuck. It's that belief that we've got to quit our job tomorrow to make this big change, or that there's no possible way that we could somehow work on our dream and what we're hoping for and that transition alongside what we're already doing. In my years of coaching a lot of female entrepreneurs, I saw this all the time. This black and white, all or none thinking can be so crushing to a dream and something we're working towards. It's that same part of you that might say, well, when I have 5 hours, I'll work on that, instead of taking advantage of 15 minutes a day every day. So starting over, trying something new, making a big leap in your life, it's not about all or nothing. You don't have to immediately make that massive change for it to be meaningful. I think that there's kind of this weird persona around like you're not serious about it unless you're all in. And even that concept of like you've burned the ships, if you've heard that analogy of like you've got to burn your ships so you have no way to back out of this big dream. Like I've had friends who have made big transitions and they've burned all their bridges so that they have to make that transition work. And it's really cost them. It's been so painful when maybe this transition doesn't work out as fast or as easily as they had hoped, and they don't have other options to pull from. So I think it's always good to be thinking, how could I do this bit by bit, and how could I start today instead of waiting until that year when I have so much time freedom. I've had women tell me that once their kids are grown, they'll finally be able to start their business they've been dreaming of. But then that story will quickly change to, well, once I retire. But honestly, like, what if you could have been working on it all along and making small bits of change all along the way that could have made that big transition to be so much easier? Some really good advice I heard a while ago was that you want to start working on your next step until your next step just feels like the next natural step to take. Like when it actually feels natural for you to make that big shift into the next reality, into the big shift you're trying to make, it will just naturally happen. You don't have to force that big change to happen right now. You can start working on it now, bit by bit, and make it a reality slowly and incrementally until it becomes undeniable that this is your next step. That was a huge part of my transition as well into this artist-author space, is that I've been working on this for years. In my spare time, waking up early, I'm working a full-time job. I have 5 children. It's not necessarily the ideal scenario to be becoming an artist alongside of that. I had to find the little cracks of time to improve my art skills and really put time and energy there so that then I could get to the place where my art is now, where it feels like the next natural step. It also built up a lot of confidence in myself to show up consistently in little ways for a long period of time, that I know I can do this now. And I didn't know that in the beginning. That wasn't obvious before. It also helped build belief in my family and loved ones because they saw me continue to show up for it. So now as they're looking at me taking this big change, they're already confident that it's gonna be okay and it's gonna work out. Mom's got this. When we don't do the all or nothing take, we can test things a little bit more. So for example, with being an artist, there are lots of ways to be an artist, and honestly, lots of ways to make money as an artist. And so I've really been testing over the years, what ways do I really like? What ways do I really resonate with? That's made me look at everything from having my work in galleries and having that being the goal versus having my art be patterns on bags and surfaces. There's just so many different ways that you can make money from your art. And I had time to explore, I had time to test, because I was starting to prioritize it in those little cracks of time instead of just quitting my job, becoming an artist, and not really having taken that whole path very seriously. So it made a huge difference. The other thing I think is really important to look at when we're considering these big changes is it can be really risky for us to think that that big dream, this big transition, this start over is going to solve everything. In reality, I think that it's a choose your hard situation. As far as lots of things are hard. It's hard to stay in my corporate job and keep showing up from 9 to 5. It's also hard to build an art business and build my art skills from scratch. But which hard do I want to choose? So if I go into this art journey believing it's just going to be smooth sailing and nothing but fun and joy all the time, I'm setting myself and my dream up for failure and disappointment. My stamina for working on that dream will also be very volatile, because if things don't just go my way and I'm not feeling amazing one day, I'm going to take it personally, believing that that dream is going to fail because I'm just not destined to succeed or something like that. When instead, if I make the stakes lower of this is just a different business model that I'm trying, or this is just a career change, it starts to put it into more realistic perspective where I can make much better decisions and be far less emotionally volatile. So my preference always is to choose the hard that helps me be my best self. And that was truly a big part of this decision. I've had small seasons over the past few years when I've been able to test being a full-time artist a little bit here and there. And I really like who I am when I'm doing art full-time. I like what kind of mom I am, what kind of wife I am, what kind of friend I am. I like how I take care of myself and the way that my daily practice and spiritual practice looks when I'm doing that path. And so that was also important to factor, even knowing that it's not necessarily an easier path to choose to be an artist and an author, but it is the path that lights me up and it brings me a lot of joy. So I want that. Lots of times that big excuse in our head that it's just too late, it really boils down to these 3 core fears of fear of financial ruin, fear of losing our identity, and fear of feeling like we've got to be all in and do it all or nothing in order for it to work. But what if this call in your heart is there for a reason? What if this dream or this transition that you just keep feeling this pull to isn't there by mistake? What if it's a part of your path? What if this is part of the magic that you're going to bring into the world, and we need that magic? So listen to it and take it more seriously and ask yourself these questions to see if it's actually possible or not, and how to make it possible if you really, really want it. Now, if you'd like more support and somebody cheering you on in making those big shifts and going after your dreams, you're in the right place. So be sure that you've subscribed, and if you want to make sure to never miss one of these pep talks, be sure to hop into my email newsletter so I can send you little love notes of encouragement and inspiration. Now, a final little bonus tip I've found to be really helpful with making big transitions and bringing those dreams to life is to give yourself something physical to anchor this transition with that you keep with you, kind of like a memento or a reminder. So for me, it's this Lilith necklace. Lilith is such an inspirational archetype. She's a total badass, and her story, or her myth, reminds me to stay aligned with what works for me and to blaze my own trail, even if that means a choice between staying in that Garden of Eden or braving the wilderness like she did. When my friend was leaving an abusive marriage, I gave her this beaded bracelet that had a little inspiring message on it that was still very discreet, and she wore it every single day as she was going through that transition, and it was rough, but that bracelet really helped anchor her in and remind her that she matters and that going after this change for her life was worth it, even though it was hell to walk through to get there. So if you need that extra little boost to just keep you anchored to your decision and to what you really want and to listening to your heart and soul, then find a memento. Maybe it's something you keep in your pocket. Maybe it's something that's always in your wallet. Maybe it's changing your phone case or anything, but just keep a reminder of it with you close, because that's gonna really help you stay anchored to keep going even when things get tough. You've got this. Remember that your dreams matter. I promise you can do this, especially if you really, really want it and you feel that call, go for it. And know that I am cheering you on.